We see them everywhere, on our cars, on the side of the road, and yeah, sometimes piled up in these massive heaps. But have you ever really stopped to think about what happens to a tire when it's done? Well, today we're diving into a really ambitious plan from the East African community to turn what is a growing environmental headache into a genuinely valuable resource. Let's get right into it. It seems like such a simple question, right? It's just a tire. But the answer, well, it's a lot more complex than you'd think. Because once a tire's life on a car is over, a whole new journey begins. And that journey, if it's not managed properly, can end up creating some pretty serious problems for our health and for the environment. And this is what happens way too often. They just pile up. Without a system, you get these literal mountains of rubber. But these things aren't just ugly to look at. They are, in a very real sense, ticking time bombs, hiding some serious dangers. So, what are we actually talking about here? What are these hidden risks? Well, this new East African standard gets right to the heart of the matter, tackling the two biggest threats that come from just letting these tire mountains grow. Okay, so look at these two columns. On the one hand, you've got uncontrolled stockpiling. That curved shape of a tire, it's just perfect for collecting rainwater. And those stagnant pools become five-star hotels for disease-carrying mosquitoes. Then, on the other hand, you have uncontrolled burning. People trying to get rid of them might set them on fire, which unleashes this incredibly toxic smoke packed with hazardous pollutants. So it's like choosing your poison, a public health crisis from disease or one from air pollution. So, facing these shared risks, the nations of East Africa figured out that trying to solve this problem one country at a time just wasn't going to work. They needed a unified, coordinated, region-wide solution. And here's the organization that's leading the charge. The East African Community, or the EAC, has put together this comprehensive standard for managing waste tires that's going to apply across all its partner states. Now, here's what's really fascinating. You might think this is all about the environment, but check out this quote from the document's foreword. It's about removing trade barriers and harmonizing requirements. So yeah, it's about safety, but it's also about economic efficiency. By creating one single set of rules for everybody, they can create a streamlined single market for waste management. That's pretty smart. All right, before we get into the nitty-gritty, the plan makes a really key distinction here. There's a used tire, which might still have some life in it. You could retread it or reuse it. But then there's a waste tire. That one is at the absolute end of its life. It's the second category, the waste tire, that these new rules are all about. Okay, so the plan maps out this really clear, controlled journey for every single waste tire. And it all starts right at the source. Let's follow the path. The whole process kicks off the second that tire comes off a vehicle. And you'll notice the theme here, control and accountability. The tires are separated right away, they're picked up only by registered collectors, and they're taken only to registered facilities. This super strict chain of custody is designed to stop those illegal dump sites from even starting. Now, once a tire gets to one of these facilities, you can't just toss it in a pile and call it a day. Nope. This is where the plan gets incredibly specific, with detailed rules for safe storage designed to prevent those two big threats we talked about, disease and, of course, fire. Let's start with what happens indoors. You can see from this diagram, the rules are super detailed, but really, they all come down to two simple things. Number one, preventing a fire from ever starting, and number two, making sure firefighters can actually stop it if it does. And this slide really gives you a sense of that detail. I mean, look at this. There are maximum height and width limits on the piles so they don't become these uncontrollable infernos. The aisles have to be wide and clear so firefighters can get through. You can't store them too close to the ceiling, which prevents heat buildup. And of course, keeping them out of boiler rooms removes an obvious ignition source. Every single rule is a defense against disaster. And that same kind of rigorous thinking applies to the outdoor storage yards. Out here, the main goal is to contain a potential fire and stop it from spreading like wildfire. So here's how they do that. First, a high fence for security, to prevent arson or accidents. The stack height is way lower than indoors to make them more stable and less intense if they do catch fire. But the most critical part? Look at the wide separation between stacks. Those are fire breaks. They're designed to give firefighters the space they need to isolate a blaze to just one pile, stopping a catastrophic chain reaction. Okay, so after being collected and stored super safely, the tire finally reaches the last stage of its journey. And the goal here is to squeeze every last bit of value out of it before it's gone for good. So what does happen to them? This chart gives us a fantastic overview. And I want you to notice something really important. Look how tiny that landfill slice is. The whole point of this standard is to prioritize turning waste into a resource. The rules basically set up a pecking order. The absolute best option is reconditioning it, so it can be reused. If you can't do that, then you can convert the tire into valuable products. We're talking things like playground surfaces or construction materials. It can also be burned as a fuel source, but only in specific industrial facilities that can handle it safely. And only when every single one of those other options is off the table is the tire finally sent to a landfill. So, we've just gone through a whole bunch of really detailed regulations, from collection to storage to what happens at the end. Let's just zoom out for a second and ask, why does any of this matter? What's the big picture here? It really just comes down to this. These rules are all about creating safer communities by cutting down on fire risks and getting rid of those mosquito breeding grounds. They're aiming for a cleaner environment by stopping illegal dumping and toxic burning. And they're pushing for a smarter, more circular economy by treating old tires not as trash, but as a resource you can actually use again. The East African community has laid out a seriously impressive and thorough roadmap on paper. But the real question, the crucial point is what happens next. Because with any ambitious plan, the blueprint is one thing. The true test is going to be in the implementation, the enforcement, and the adoption on the ground. And that is both the challenge and the huge opportunity that lies ahead.